But I think that it was wonderfully helpful to have Governor Richardson note his support for delisting the MEK, for re-establishing an American security presence at Camp Ashraf, and for support for the opposition in Iran. I have to say, what the Stuxnet virus is to atomic weapons, Camp Ashraf is to the regime in Tehran. It's the chrysalis, it's the incubus, I think, of its ultimate destruction. And there's no other reason or way to account for the fear that Tehran seems to have of 2,400 people who happen to live in a camp in Iraq, other than that they see the potential themselves, that the kind of almost martyrdom that is being imposed upon those people is in fact the test of the resilience of the Iranian democratic opposition. So I think Tehran is its own worst enemy in having impelled the Iraqis to attack Camp Ashraf over and over again. Now, the status of the people at Ashraf has been made the subject of some technical discussions. I very much endorse what Irene Khan said, that quite apart from the fact that the U.S. recognized their status as protected persons under the Geneva Conventions, and these are the conventions that the Obama administration has pledged to observe. We in the U.S. didn't fight the Iraqi war in order to install a pro-Iranian regime that would surrender the democratic opposition in Iran. I also do think, I served on the Defense Policy Board during a good part of the aughts from about 03 to 09, and had a valued and honored association with the American military in doing that. And certainly my view of the honor that is embedded in American military service is of a caliber that it would not be consistent in anybody's ken to surrender people that we pledged to protect. And the American military, above all else, honors the Geneva Conventions. Now, I very much agree with Irene Khan that the UN should be more vocal. I'm not aware that the High Commissioner for Human Rights has yet spoken out. The head of the UN mission for Mr. Ad Melkirk has made statements that I would consider at best tepid. As he said, those loudspeakers do not serve any reasonable purpose, and we have from the very outset asked the Iraqi government to make sure that those loudspeakers would be removed. When challenges arise, of course, we do not hide our concern if there is reason to do so. That's not the kind of blunt table talk that you need to strike fear into a regime. UNAMI needs a presence in the camp 24/7. There needs to be a presence of an American military outpost restoring Camp Grizzly, forward operating base Camp Grizzly in the camp, so that there's some deterrent value against the kind of hooliganism that we've recently seen. I agree with Madam Rajavi that the issue belongs on the agenda of the UN Security Council, but this is an issue that even the Group of 77, which is the group actually of 132 countries of the South, must insist be put on the Security Council agenda, not only the agenda of the General Assembly. One thing I think Europeans can do is to police the enforcement of economic sanctions. The sanctions do not self-enforce. They have to be imposed by an act of political will. I agree with Governor Richardson that one should try to build upon diplomatic measures, but I do think that the old favorite aphorism of Washington has some cogency here. It's the old joke about baseball. It says that diplomacy without the possibility of coercion is like baseball without a bat. And unless you got a bat to hit the ball, ain't nothing going to happen. So I do think that whether or not one is in favor of regime change by kinetic means, nonetheless, there has to be a message that the patience of the West is not forever, that the Iranians cannot dig themselves out with China or with India or with new markets in the East, that this will be made an effective strangling hold on the undemocratic regime. I do not think I myself would ever have the courage to be a human rights activist on the ground the way thousands of people in Iran are. I'm just not that physically brave. Sometimes in academia I was brave because you're not allowed to dissent in academia. But physically I'm not brave enough. And therefore my invisible hat is off to the thousands and thousands of Iranian citizens who have the courage to brave torture and jail and death for the sake of democracy. And finally, I would just like to say I very much agree with John Bolton that this is not just any tyrannical regime. It has enormous strategic consequences for the world. When I was on the Defense Policy Board, from non-classified sources, it was very much apparent that the rogue regimes were all cooperating with each other in dissemination of technology, in the sharing of intelligence, whether it was A.Q. Khan in Pakistan or the nuclear folks in North Korea or the nuclear folks in Iran. This has everything to do with the ability of Lebanon to survive, to bring Syria back into the Western camp, to try to make peace in Palestine. None of that will succeed until the viral infection of the Iranian regime is somehow eradicated. So thank you.